Hi everyone, and welcome to this first Connect group teaching in our Term 2 series, WWJS, What Would Jesus Say? And in this series, we're looking at some of life's biggest issues and looking at them through the lens of Jesus and what Jesus had to say about them and how he responded to these issues when he was walking the shores of Galilee in his 3-year ministry. You know, the things that Jesus taught and said in his ministry are as relevant and as useful to us today as they were to those that were hearing them as he walked the shores of Galilee back 2,000 years ago. And so I wanted to take a whole series and just look at what he has to say about these things. And today I wanted to pick up on one of the themes that I also spoke about on a Sunday message a couple of weeks back on the 12th of April. Reason being is that this issue is big enough to be dealt with as an entire series on its own. So this, along with a couple of others, I'm dealing with more than once in the course of this series. So I want to talk about emotional stress. You may recall we spoke about how Jesus was able to, when you encounter Jesus, Jesus can change your life, and a lot of the stresses and pressures can begin to change. You can begin to see life through a different perspective. And we looked at the Gadarene demoniac and how Jesus changed his life from being naked and wild and out of control, and he encountered Jesus and was delivered. And we see that he was sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind. So Jesus can take us from being out of control to being in control. He can take us from being naked and ashamed to being clothed and sane. And that's the power of an encounter with Jesus. And so today I wanted to kind of add to that. Not necessarily counteract it. I just want to add to it because I understand that sometimes we encounter Jesus and all our problems go away. But other times we encounter Jesus and our problems don't seem to go away. And how do we reconcile that? How do we cope? Well, I can tell you that even if your problems don't go away, if you will encounter Jesus and let him come and shine his light into your life, you will have a different perspective on your problems. You'll start to see them in a different light. Before we get into this, I wanted to show you some statistics. According to Beyond Blue, which is a nationally recognised organisation that helps, a non-government organisation that helps people with depression. And these are some statistics in Australia with regards to depression and anxiety. They say that depression is the leading cause of disability in the whole world. In Australia, 45% of people will experience a mental health condition in their lifetime. Nearly 2,500 people end their own life through suicide each year. That is about twice as many people as there are road deaths in Australia each year. And the sobering statistic is that is about 10 times the number of murders that are in Australia each year. So we hear a lot about murders, but we don't hear a lot about suicide in the news. And yet I would venture to say that most of you watching this will know someone or have someone in your family, or you will be associated with someone who has been affected in some way by the tragedy of suicide. In any one year in Australia, 1 million people will be diagnosed with depression and 2 million with anxiety. Now, anxiety and depression are actually two clinical different diagnoses, but they often go hand in hand. Often people have depression and anxiety together, and these are real issues. And the sad part about this, when you read those statistics, you realise this is a big problem in our country. This is a big issue. And the sad part is that the church traditionally has not dealt with this issue well for a whole host of reasons. And I think it's high time we do our best to be the loving hands and ministry of Christ that we can to ourselves and to other people, and that people can experience Jesus' love when they're struggling. And I think there's a whole host of problems that the church has had with this. I've listed a few here. Over time, the church has just labelled it as sin. If you're depressed, you're in sin. And you're just a sinner and you just need to get over it. You know, you need to solve your problem, or you just ignore it. The church hasn't even addressed the issue, just doesn't even talk about it, kind of buries our head in the sand and says, look, it's not even an issue, or it's not there, or it's in the too hard basket and we don't know what to do with it, so we'll ignore it. And then there's a whole issue of medication. And look, I'm not telling you what you should or shouldn't believe about medication. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I believe about medication in a moment, but I'm not telling you what you should or shouldn't agree with me. I'm very open to people that have different opinions on this. But by and large, the church has not dealt with this issue all that well. Now, let me backtrack a little bit to our message a couple of weeks ago, because I unpacked a passage in Matthew chapter 11, and I think it's probably good for us to look at this again ourselves. Not that we just necessarily want to go back, but we need to add to it. So Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 30, in the Message version, Jesus says, "Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and learn to live free and lightly." A couple of things about this. This is a passage in the Message, but in the other versions it says, if you come to me, if you're heavy laden, and I'll give you rest, and put my yoke upon you and learn from me, because my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And the Message is just basically put that into a different way, but it's saying exactly the same thing. But note that Jesus is actually offering tremendous hope to you. Are you burned out? Are you stressed out? Are you emotionally dry? Are you doing it tough? Jesus isn't looking down on you. He's not saying get over it. He's saying come to me, learn from me. He's actually producing a wonderful offer of saying, come and learn, come and hang with me. I'll help you. I'll give you a real rest. Jesus is saying, come and put your head in my yoke. Come and walk with me. Watch how I do life. A yoke is a device that was used to, it still is used, to put oxen and beasts of burden in that big yoke and to do ploughing. And Jesus is saying, I'm in the yoke with you. I have a yoke. We all have a yoke. But the question is the yoke that you have around your neck, is it Jesus' yoke, or is it a yoke that you've put there by your own doing, or you've put there because of somebody else's doing? Jesus is saying, if you want to experience real rest, put your head in my yoke. There's still work to do, but when Jesus has got his head in the yoke next to us, how many people know he's carrying the burden? And you pretty much get to go along for a ride. He will call you to do certain things and be certain things and call you to a certain lifestyle, but if your head is beside Jesus, he is taking you on the ride. He's promising rest. And that's why, because it's practically a free ride if you learn to put your head in the right yoke. My own emotional journey during the course of even just the start of this year has been quite challenging, and I don't always consider myself prone to depression. I'm not normally that way. I have my moments, I have my days, in fact, where things are pretty dark and I can wake up and for no apparent reason I just feel like it's hard to get out of bed and it's hard to go to work and it's hard to think straight. But I know that generally speaking, I'm not necessarily prone to that. And I, at times in my life, I guess I've been proud of that. And I thought, somehow, even if it's just at an intellectual level, somehow I thought, I'm better than other people. But as is so often the case, until we go through stuff, we don't always understand how frail we really are. And so I've had some challenging days in recent months. And some of you will think, Rowan, what have you got to complain about? All you do is read your Bible and pray and check a few emails. But that's not exactly true, by the way. But I'm not saying that my issues are as bad as your issues or as bad as someone else's issues. But here's the key: we all face stuff. You face stuff and I face stuff, and the stuff I'm facing may not be the stuff that you're facing. But together, we all have challenges, and our perception is our reality. And so, for whatever reason, we all face issues in life, and I've been going through some of those challenges with my emotional energy levels, and some days it's frustrating because I can't even pinpoint, and you might be able to identify with this, I can't even pinpoint why I'm feeling a bit depressed or a bit flat or a bit anxious. It's not like I can go, it's because of that particular challenge in my life, or it's because I haven't got enough money for that thing, or it's because this relationship is not going as well as it is. For me, as a man, as a choleric man, it'd be nice if I could do that, because then I could fix the problem. But some days I can't even figure it out. And the next day I'll wake up even a few days later I'll wake up and suddenly it feels fine. And I think, well, what was the good of that? I didn't even know what I could do to fix it, or how I know it's not going to happen again. And you may find that's the case for you. But in my case, God is helping me to understand and learn what are the triggers. and how to press into Him. So I'm discovering the importance of pressing into Jesus when I'm facing these dark times. And all of us need to do that. We all need to encounter Jesus. He's coming I wrote here, He's helping me come to terms with the fact that there's always going to be causes of stress in my life, and I need to get comfortable with the journey and not see all the interruptions and the down days and the struggles and the challenges as an interruption to my life, but see them as part of the journey and learn to actually embrace the journey and embrace even those dark times, add them to me, the experiences, to the person I am, rather than seeing them as an interruption to what I want to become or what I think I need to become. Well, back in about last October, down in C3 Bowral, they ran a crusade and Pastor Claude Corello spoke, and on one of the nights he talked about this issue of his emotional journey after losing his stepson in a car accident and some of the challenges and depression that he went through. And he highlighted 4 causes for emotional, mental health issues: stress, emotion, anxiety, depression, and so on. He listed 4, and we're going to list them here. But it's not to say that your challenge may not just be, it's not easy to compartmentalize it into one of the 4. Sometimes it is just one, but sometimes it'll be more than one, and they tend to interlink with each other. The first one is, he said, they all start with C, by the way. He said circumstantial. Sometimes stuff just happens in life. Bad stuff happens, and we live in a fallen world. Sometimes just life happens. Circumstances happen. There's no reason behind it. There's no rhyme or reason. It just happens. You know, you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and circumstances happen, and that can be the cause of emotional problems. The second C is cognitive. And that has to do with our thinking. So he's saying that we need to understand that our thinking, the way we think, the way we process thought, the way we process and bring situations into our mind and think about them, that can affect our emotional health. And he said we need to learn to change our thinking. That's what Romans 12 means. It says when it says be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And this is a lifelong process. Learning how to unthink certain things and think certain other things. And we have been conditioned from youth to think in a certain way when a certain trigger comes at us. If a certain emotion happens or a certain circumstance happens, it tends to trigger an emotional response, and that's not always good. And so Dr. Carol Leaf, many of you have heard her and done her detox program. She talks about this stuff in her 21-day detox. If you've not done that, it might be worth looking at, especially if you're going through some dark stuff right now, where she teaches us how to learn to think differently, change our cognitive behavior so we start to view external circumstances in a different way by changing our thinking. So there's 1 is circumstantial, 2 is cognitive, 3 is chemical. We're a complex machine, and we can't isolate the psychological from the physiological as much as we'd like to. Our brain chemistry actually affects our emotion. God has made us, Psalm 119 says, fearfully and wonderfully made. We can't even understand it all. So there are certain things that happen in our brain chemistry that will affect our psychology, our psychological response to things. And so we need to understand that. That's what I wanted to talk about medication. Because some of you may say, well, stay away from any kind of mental altering medication at all. Now, I won't say that, and I don't say that. And if you want to know what I think as your pastor, this is what I think. I think, first of all, it's worth saying that like any other medicine, it can be used to enhance your health. So it does have possible positive responses to enhance your health. But it's still a developing science. And it's because the brain is such a complicated organism to understand. It's very much a developing science. So it has its benefits, but it's not without its side effects. And you need to be well educated and well understand what the potential side effects are. You should speak to a doctor. You should start with a GP and begin there and talk to them about what you're struggling with, what your challenges are, and that can help you with this chemical side. And lastly, don't assume it will be the sole answer. Don't assume that just if you start taking medicine that your depression's going to go away, your anxiety's going to go away, and suddenly you're going to be on top of the moon. I often describe it like you might feel like you're in a 12-foot pit, and there's just no way you're going to be able to get yourself out of a 12-foot pit. You can jump all you want, you can climb all you want, you just can't get out of it. Taking medication is not going to get you out of the pit. It may elevate you in the pit. It might be like throwing in 7 or 8 feet of soil, but you still got to climb up and climb up 5 or 6 feet to get out. It still takes work, but it's now in a place where you can start to do that. If you can get the help you need, you can start to do that. So that's my thoughts on medication. You're free to talk about that among yourself, but please be gracious with one another. Understand that in any given room there are people on medication, and I don't want you to be judgmental or critical if you have different views. You're entitled to your views, but let's show grace and compassion towards one another. And the fourth reason that he gives, the first one is circumstantial, the second is cognitive, which is thinking, the third is chemical, and the fourth reason that Pastor Claude gives is a curse. And there are spiritual reasons why things happen to us. The Bible makes that clear. In fact, the scriptures say God punishes the sins of the fathers on the third and fourth generation of those who hate him. So there are things in which there are spiritual curses that are transferred down. But I don't want to harbour on this too much, but he goes on, because that verse goes on and says, but he shows compassion to 1,000 generations of those who love him. And so if you think you might be under a curse, if you think there's something in your past or in your family line that is affecting you, here's some good news. You don't have to live with it. See, it says for the third and fourth generation of those who hate him. Do you hate God? I hope not. If you love God, then you can put an end to that curse right now. All you need to do is say, God, I renounce that curse. I refuse to let that thing have any play in my life any longer. If there's something that's been I've been brought up in, a spiritual curse, I break it in the name of Jesus. You died on the cross to set me free from that thing. And then you can walk in freedom and you can break the power of that curse. So the most important thing in all of this is chasing Jesus, is having a relationship with Jesus. All of those other things that I've just explained to you will find their ultimate fulfillment when you have a relationship with Jesus. So just to conclude this teaching today, I want us to look again at the passage that we looked at a couple of weeks ago in Matthew chapter 6, the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus addresses money and possessions. Now, I want us to look at this not just from the issue of money and possessions, but the greater issue that is at stake here is that one of the causes for a lot of our worries and anxieties are to do with temporary things, temporal things. Money and possessions, for instance, are temporary things. So this passage has an underlying truth that's applicable to us in whatever area of anxiety or stress or emotional pressure, depression you may be facing. We're going to talk about money specifically right at the end of this series in a devotion, and then in July we're going to have an entire series dedicated to what Jesus has to say about money and giving and finance and debt and all that sort of stuff. So we'll spend a whole month or so on that in July. But for now, let's look at this passage, and as I say, view it through the context of how it affects your emotional health. Jesus says in verse 19 of chapter 6, "Don't store up treasures here on earth where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal." I think it's important for us to understand that in our society we have an unhealthy overemphasis on the temporary and the temporal, the things of this world. And a lot of our problems come because that's where our stress comes from. That's where we put so much of our energy into things that are actually not going to last forever. They're not eternal. So Jesus is saying, don't store up treasure. Don't focus on the eternal, on the temporal. He says, instead, store up for yourselves treasure in heaven where moths and rusts cannot destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there your heart will be also. You've probably heard me teach about this in giving messages and so on, but Jesus is illustrating a point here. If we invest our treasure into something eternal, our heart will follow that. So if we give of our time and our effort and our treasure and our finance and everything, if we give to eternity rather than temporary, then our heart will automatically follow where we've invested our time. And so Jesus is teaching that. And he goes on and says, your eye is the lamp that provides light for your body. When your eye is good, your whole body is filled with light. But when your eye is bad, your whole body is filled with darkness. And if the light that you think you actually have is really darkness, then how deep that darkness is. I guess the question for us is, what are we putting before our eyes? If our eyes are like the light that we focus on, what are we putting before our eyes? Are we putting temporary passing pleasures before our eyes? Are we focusing constantly on things that are here today, gone tomorrow, that aren't secure, that aren't rock solid, that don't last for eternity? Because if we're putting those things before us, they will be the light that we look at. And our world is trying to dictate to you and I what the light should look like. And it's saying in our messages, in our media and advertising and everywhere we go, walking down the street, you'll see it. The message that our world is saying is the light. This is what you need to see as the light. This is the thing that will bring light and life to your life. And it is temporary things. It's pleasures for now. It's having the best of things now. Looking after yourself, pleasing yourself, being comfortable. If you put that before your eyes and focus on that, you'll have lasting life and joy and peace and so on. Of course, that's a lie of the enemy, because that's not the case at all. The real light, Jesus is saying, if you think you've got light and it's actually darkness, then you've got real darkness in your life. It's not about being comfortable. Jesus says, don't think about those things. When we think we are focused on those things, we're going to be in trouble. He's saying, focus on eternal things. Jesus goes on and says, no one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. That is why I tell you, don't worry about your everyday life, whether you have enough food and drink or enough clothes to wear. Isn't life more than food and your body more than clothing? Look at the birds. They don't plant or harvest or store in barns, but your heavenly Father feeds them. Aren't you more valuable to Him than they are? Can all your worries add a single moment to your life? I found actually the opposite happens. When I get obsessed with worries about temporary things, how I'm going to get by financially, how I'm going to fix this up, how I'm going to deal with that issue, how I'm going to make myself comfortable, how I'm going to make my life better on this earth. When I get obsessed with those things, I actually find that my peace is robbed rather than my peace is enhanced. Worry actually doesn't add a moment, it actually subtracts the quality of life, and that can actually subtract moments from our life too. We can actually, become sick because we've affected our life with worry. Jesus goes on and he says, and why worry about your clothing? Look at the lilies of the field and how they grow. They don't work or make their clothing. Yet Solomon in all his glory was not dressed as beautifully as they are. And if God cares so wonderfully for the wildflowers that are here today and thrown into the fire tomorrow, He'll certainly care for you. Why do you have so little faith? So don't worry about these things, saying, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or what will we wear? These things dominate the thoughts of unbelievers. But your Heavenly Father already knows all your needs. Seek the kingdom of God above all else and live righteously, and He will give you everything you need. You might say, well, that's easier for you to say. It's easier to do. It's easier to say than to do. And I have to agree with you. There is all kinds of stuff that happens in life that makes this hard to do. But this series is called WWJS, What Would Jesus Say? And Jesus didn't waste words. If He said this, then he's teaching us an important lesson. And I do believe that when we can grasp what He's saying here, our emotional health can begin to improve. And Jesus is saying, take your eyes off your worries and seek His kingdom. Jesus is saying, if you would take your eyes off your problems and choose deliberately to put your eyes onto Him, then He will take care of your problems. You see, worry is really faith. It's just misdirected faith. Worry is faith about tomorrow, that things aren't going to work out, that you're not going to get by. And Jesus goes on and He says, so don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring its own worries. Today's trouble is enough for today. He's not saying, you're overwhelmed with problems. He's saying, look, there's enough going on for today for you to focus on today. And if you keep focusing on tomorrow and keep worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow, you're not going to enjoy the journey that you have today. And that's what I've been saying that God's been dealing with me in this recent months is, Rowan, you need to enjoy the journey you're on and not get stressed out and worried that things aren't working the way you'd like in life. Understand that you can gain experience from today's journey and become a better person from that. And Jesus is saying here that you'll actually find peace if you take your eye off the problem and put it on something else. So worry is actually faith misdirected. It's faith misdirected towards the future, and it's you trying to fix your future. Oh, I need to do something in order to prevent this happening and that happening in my life. This is going to cause a problem. I've got to do something about it. Whereas true faith is actually seeking God and saying, God, I'm going to look to you. I trust that you'll take care of my future. I trust that you will clothe me. I trust that you will feed me. If you feed the lilies, you feed the birds, you clothe the lilies. Don't feed the lilies. You clothe the lilies and feed the birds, then you'll clothe me and you'll feed me. And I trust that I'll put you first and everything else will begin to take care of itself. So just to conclude, if you are concerned about your emotional health, look, I've got some good news. There is hope. First of all, you need to meet Jesus. You need to have an encounter with Jesus, because he is the starting point for any change, significant change on the inside. So determine, no matter how you're feeling, determine to press into Jesus right now. Say, Lord, I'm going to press into you. It's not necessarily going to change your circumstances on the outside immediately, but you can begin to change things on the inside by pressing into Jesus. Don't give up on your faith. He promises rest, remember? He says, come to me. Open invitation. Come to me and I'll give you real rest, he says. He promises if you stay close to him that he'll look after you. Second point, don't isolate yourself from church and Connect Group. I know how hard it can be. I've been in days when it's very hard to muster the energy to be around people and get to church, and you might be feeling that now. But you came to Connect and you're watching this, and if you're not watching this in Connect and you're watching it somewhere else, let me urge you, get connected. I know it's hard at times, but be connected. I often commend people who are going through a tough time, and I say, look, you could have done anything. You could have stayed at home. You probably don't even feel like being here, but the fact that you are here is a testament to the fact that you've got some energy on the inside to do something about your life. And I know the temptation to pull the covers over your head and go back to bed because life's too much. But Proverbs says that the one who isolates themselves rages against sound judgment. Isolation is dangerous, but isolation is what you want to do when you're depressed, when you're anxious. But let me encourage you, do whatever you can to get to church every week, get to Connect Group every time it's on, connect with people, because that is how you get strength. Thirdly, if you're really doing it tough, or you just need to talk to someone, start with your Connect leader. Talk to your Connect leader or your leader in whatever sphere of life that has pastoral responsibility for you. Begin there. Be open and transparent. I do this with the people I'm responsible to in my spiritual walk with God. I'm open and transparent. I try to be as best as I can with them about how I'm traveling, because if you can begin to open up to people who can help you, then you can begin to open your heart to receive input from those who are called by God to support you. Next one, you can speak to your GP. And I tell people this a lot. Go to your doctor. If you're really struggling with anxiety, depression, emotional pressure, start with your doctor. Go to them. And they can actually help you. If there's medication needs involved, they can help you with that. But even if you don't need medication, it's a good place to go. In fact, you can go to your doctor and they can refer you to see a psychologist or a counsellor. And I actually have a list in the notes that you can have a look at. These aren't people we're kind of authorising, but these are Christian counsellors who we're aware of in the area. And we're not saying that if you go to them that you'll be totally fixed up. It's between you and them, but we wanted to resource you with some people. And we recommend you see a Christian psychologist so you've got the scriptural perspective. And you go to your GP and they can actually give you what they call a mental health plan, which means you can go and see a Christian psychologist and have like 6 free visits. It doesn't cost you anything to go and see someone and start to talk to a professional who can help you. It doesn't have to be a psychologist. You can just go and see a counsellor. It's just like a lower level of qualification, if you like, but there's some great counsellors around. You just won't have the benefit of being able to get the free visits, but that's entirely up to you. But whatever you do, talk to someone. And your Connect leader, probably most of us, even myself included, I'm not comfortable and that I have enough training to be able to provide everybody with the counselling they need, let alone have the time to be able to do that. But our commitment as a church is to help you be as emotionally whole as you can. And so if you can walk along, and we'll walk along with you as your leaders and your Connect leaders, we'll walk with you and support you and help you to get the help that you need, because we believe that God wants you to have freedom and live above your circumstances and above the challenges of life. All right, well, in your discussion groups now, there's a list of questions in your notes that I'll just take some time to unpack. But let me encourage you, if you feel comfortable to do so, be open and transparent about where you're at. There's some pretty kind of pointed questions in there helping you to self-examine. Be open and ask people for prayer and support, and determine to encourage one another. Whatever you do, don't just give pat answers to people. Support one another, pray for one another, and let's together see ourselves grow and become more and more emotionally healthy. All right, guys, have a great discussion in Connect. I'll see you next time.